Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I could not make the meeting, but I had a prior commitment for the new committee members. My name is Dr. Joseph Reinhardt. I'm a professional bioethicist and the lead consultant on this case involving Frida. When I look at this case, I would not recommend that Frida receives a second organ transplant, and I'm basing this conclusion on approaches and principles of Kantianism and utilitarianism. So when we're breaking down this case from a utilitarianism point of view, we must keep in mind that we are seeing if actions yield good consequences over bad consequences. And when these good consequences outweigh our bad consequences, then ultimately we can say that our action was ethical. In the case of Frida, since her condition is declining, I don't think she's a very practical recipient of the organ, and this is due to the outcomes or consequences of that organ transplant being very low success rate. And by taking a valuable thing like an organ in a hospital setting and wasting it in a patient with low survival rate, you're depreciating the value of that organ and the possible consequences that could come from it, good and bad. And instead, you could be giving it to a person with a high rate of recovery and a better prognosis and chance at full recovery. And by robbing a waitlisted patient like this of the opportunity for that, you're ultimately killing more people than you could be helping. And this goes against the utilitarian approach because it's all about maximizing our good consequences over our bad consequences for something to be ethical. And therefore, based on utilitarianism, I believe that saving the organ for another patient with a higher chance of survival or recovery rather than Frida would be a better, yield more better consequences and ultimately be more ethical. So when breaking down this case using Kantianism, we have to do it on the basis of acknowledging that Kantianism respects the person as an individual and acknowledges that this person has their own autonomy, and we should treat them as an individual rather than as a means. And instead of looking at our actions and what these actions do in the sense of consequences, we instead look at our moral duty, and what our moral duty would tell us what actions would be moral rather than the consequences that come from it. And while Kantianism would require us to respect Frida's existence as a human, it would also have us act in a way that would still follow this moral code or duty. And this moral code or duty would tell us that a health professional should act justly and fairly to everyone when distributing limited medical supplies, especially in something like a organ. And when taking the transplant policies into account, we know that the three criteria are put into place to uphold this justice and fairness for all patients. And we cannot make Frida an exception to this, regardless of whether or not she is in the hospital because of her own good or because of our mistake medically. And we also cannot make any other exceptions based on things like wealth, because although she has wealth and although she could donate back to us, we cannot decide to value her based on this wealth, because otherwise then we're using her as a means, because we think that we're going to only save her to get money back from her. And so by overriding this moral duty and code of not only the medical policies, but also using Frida as a means, we would be going against the whole criteria of Kantianism to make something ethical. And therefore, using a Kantian approach, I think that she should not receive the organ transplant for a second time. When looking at this case from both a Kantianism and utilitarianism standpoint, we can see that Kantianism ethics would tell us that in order to fulfill our medical duty, we must uphold the justice and equality for all patients by following medical policy in situations like this where exceptions can try to arise. On the other hand, utilitarianism would support the transplant refusal of the organ because it prioritizes actions that yield good consequences over bad consequences. And through the analysis of both this case, using both ethical frameworks, I have found support for my recommendation that I don't think Frida should receive an additional transplant.